Hello friends, in this lab we will see how to inject a default route into the RIP protocol. So there are basically 5 different ways to do this. First one is using the summary address, second through redistribution, third using the default information originate command, fourth is default originate command with the route map, and the fifth is using the conditional route map. We will study all these 5 different methods, and before that there are 4 steps which we need to follow. And what are those? We will enable RIP on all the 4 routers. Second is we will create ACL on router 1, this one, and stop advertising the default route to R4. So R4 we can assume in our topology is our ISP. So R1, R2, R3 is our under administration. We will create a default route on router 1 pointing towards next hop 14004. So on R1, when we use summary address, redistribution, default information originate command, using all these 5 methods, the default route which we have on R1 routing table, that will be advertised to router 2 and router 3. Okay, so as we have RIP running between R1 and R2, this default route will also go to router 4. So what we want to do is we will create an ACL on router 1 and stop advertising default route to router 4. If we have a default route on router 4 as well as on router 1, it will create a loop in our network. So we need to make sure that we just have default route on router 1 and specific routes on router 4. So router 4 should receive all the routes of router 1, router 2 and router 3. Step D is router 4 should not advertise its network to router 1. So these two networks of 4 network, these should not be advertised to router 1, and hence router 1 will not advertise it further to router 2 and router 3. So from router 1 we can reach to these networks using the default route. Therefore router 2 and router 3, they will also will be able to reach these two networks using the default route. So this configuration of all the topology and all these default route methods, I have done the configuration in the notepad, and I will this configuration in the video description. You can check this configuration over there. So these are the router 4 RIP configuration, and from here on I have done the default route configuration of all different 5 methods. Okay, so we will go all these by all these methods one by one. So I'm going to start first of all with this basic configuration on all the 4 routers. Starting from router 1 configuration. Okay, so this command was rejected. We need to see why was that rejected. We missed to copy interface serial 1/0. Let's do this one more time. It looks perfect this time. Let's copy the configuration of router 2. Now it's time for router 3 configuration. Copy, go to router 3. Now let's do router 4 configuration. Done. Come back to router 1, show IP route on router 2, show IP route RIP on router 3, show IP route RIP. So on router 3 we are getting R1 routes, R2 routes, and these are the router 4 routes, and we are getting this on router 2 as well. So as per the step, let's go above and see enable RIP on all the routers, which we have done that. Now create an ACL on R1 and stop advertising the default route to R4. First of all, we need to have a default route first in the routing table of R1 before advertising it. Okay, so right now we don't have any default route on router 1. Yeah, let's create one IP route, and 14004 is our ISP root IP address, in our case router 4. Now let's check the routing table again on router 1. Okay, the routing table. Can we ping 14004? Yes, we can. Okay, now we actually I was doing show IP route rip. Okay, so that's why I was not able to see this route, because this is a static route. Okay, so show IP route rip, we won't see this. Either we can do show IP route static, we will see this, or either we can do the proper complete command show IP route, and we will see this default route. Now when we go to router 4, in the routing table of R4, we will see this default route. Not now, because we haven't used this default information originate. Okay, so let hold on for this step. Okay, and before that I want to show you that how router 4 receives an default route using this default information originate command, which is the step, which is the third method. Let's go to router 1, and in the RIP configuration type default information originate. Okay, now let's see, on router 2 we received the default route. Okay, and router 3 we have received the default route. On router 4 we have received the default route. Like I said before, our router 4 is an ISP. We should not send this default route to them, and that's why we should block it on router 1. Let's do that. Before creating an access list, make sure you don't have any access list. So we already have two access lists, 1 and 10. Let's create access list 5 and stop sending the default route to router 4 and permit everything else. Go to RIP configuration, use distribute list 5 out serial 1 by 0. Okay, so we have called 5 number access list in this distribute list, and we have stopped advertising updates via interface 01/0. Let's check the access list 5. So in the deny we have got 1 match, and the permit statement we have got 13 matches. Clear the IP route table. Let's go back to router 4, check the routing table now, show IP route rip. This time we should not receive the default route, right, which we have achieved, but we are still getting router 2 routes and router 3 routes, because we created a permit statement in the access list, right? So come back to our notepad. So I was referring to this point, create ACL on R1, which we have done just now, and stop advertising the default route to router 4. Now router 4 should receive all routes of R1, R2, R3, which we have seen that R4 should not advertise its network to router 1. So router 4 are having two connected routes, 4410, 4420. This will be received by router 1, which it has, because we have enabled RIP between router 1 and router 4, so as router 2 and so as router 3. We do not want to receive these networks from ISV. Okay, so what we need to do is go back to router 4 in the config mode. Before creating access list, check we don't have any access list. Okay, so you can see that I have already created one access list, number 2, and I have called these two networks. Okay, so those are being denied. Okay, let me see. Clear access list counters, show access list. Okay, so these counters are now removed. Okay, now there are no any counters. I am going to apply this access list under the RIP configuration using distribute list. Call the access list number, which is 2 in our case, out 01 by 0. We do not want to send these updates. Let's check access list, clear the routing table. Okay, so we have got one match in the access list. Go back to router 1. Okay, so we are not receiving these networks which are behind router 4 anymore. On router 2, clear the routing table. Okay, it looks perfect over here. Clear the routing table on our router 3. Check the routing table. Okay, so if we ping now, we should be able to ping because we have a default route in the routing table. Okay, which I'm going to remove now from RIP configuration, because I'm going to do step by step. Okay, just remove this command. Now let's check the first method of using the summary address. Okay, on router 1 we have this default route in our routing table. We are not advertising right now default route to router 4. Okay, we don't see any default route here. Let's go to router 3 and see if we have default route here. No, because I removed the default or information originate command. Now I'm going to do our first method, which is summary address. Over here, IP summary RIP, and hit enter. Okay, so summary address, this is our first method. Now go to router 2. Okay, so you can see that we have got the summary address default route using the summary address on router 1. Now if we ping with a repeat count of 999, we can ping. Okay, because we have default route. As soon as I remove the summary, this ping will lost. It's not right now because it takes some time. Let me clear the routing table on router 1, and you can see that we have started receiving U, which is unreachable. We are still pinging. Why? Let's check that. On router 3 we are still receiving default route. Clear the routing table. Just look at this counter, it's 37 seconds, which should not happen at any cost. This update must refresh before 30 seconds. Okay, so we don't have default route, and on R1 on R2, why R2 is still able to reach default network? Because you know the invalid timer of RIP is 3 minutes, 1 minute, 3 minutes, which means 180 seconds, which is not that good. Clear the routing table so that this entry can be removed from the routing table. Okay, we don't have default route anymore. Now initiate the ping again. Come back to router 1. Let's look at the second method, redistribution. Okay, so we know that we have a static route as a default route in router 1 routing table. Go to RIP configuration, just type this command redistribute static, and that's it. Come back to router 2. You can see that we have restored the connectivity. Come back to router 1, remove this no redistribute static, come back to router 2, Okay, we have lost the connectivity. It looks perfect. Now let's look at the third method, which is the default information originate. Okay, how to use it? On the edge router, which is connected to the ISP, type here default information originate, come back to router 2, and we have restored the connectivity. Alright, now let's look at the method number 4 of injecting default route into the RIP protocol. So we have lost connectivity again because we do not have default route on router 2 and router 3. So the fourth method is default information originate with route map. I have already done the configuration of all the 4 methods down there. So the fourth method says we should have a default route pointing to the ISP, create one route map, name it anything you like, set the interface, and come out of the route map. In the RIP configuration, use this command. I cannot do this practical on my lab, reason being this method says we are using route map, okay, and in this route map we can set an interface. In my case, I have a broadcast Ethernet interface. So for example, from router 1 I want to send a default route to router 2 but not to router 3. In this case we can use router map and name it only router 2, set interface, just assume this was point-to-point link, okay, not Ethernet. So the link which was going to router 2 was serial 1/0 and to router 3 serial 2/0. So I could say serial 1/0 over here, come out of it, in the RIP configuration call this route map. So we would router 2 would router 1 will advertise default route to router 2 only. Okay, so hope you get this. Let me mention this again. So I will give this configuration in the video description. Let's look at the fifth method, default information originate with the conditional route map. So this lab we can do in our scenario. So we have a default route pointing to router 4. So the condition is R2 R3 will receive default route until loopback 1 interface of router 1 is up. So we will shut down the interface of router 1, which is loopback 1, and we will see that default route from router 2 router 3's routing table will disappear. So if we unshut the loopback 1 interface of router 1, the connectivity will restore on router 2 router 3. Let's check this practical. So we will create this route map, we will create this access list. I'm gonna copy paste on router 1, do show access list, do clear counters access list, okay. So there are no counters anymore in access list 1. Show route map. The route map is condition R1 loopback 1 underscore up. Go to configuration, under the RIP, use this default information originate, call the route map with the route map name, and the name of the route map is this. Okay, let me see what's going on router 2. We don't have connectivity on router 2 because router 2 router 3 don't have default routes. Hit enter. Okay, you can see that we have restored the connectivity. Now shut this interface, because like I told you, as long as loopback interface of router 1 is up, router 2 router 3 will receive these routes, default routes.
Now under the loopback interface, just shut this. We should lose this connectivity, which we did. Looks perfect. Come back to router 1, unshut this loopback interface. It should come back perfect. Router 3, show IP route rip. We have default route, proceed from router 1, and we do have default route on router 2. That's why we are able to ping route a network which is behind router 4. Let me show you on router 2, this one. Thank you.